Hello and welcome to Upstack America's Oracle EBS Financials Functional Training. My name is Bob and I'm the lead senior consultant for Upstack America. And with me today I have Victor, who is also a senior consultant. And today we are handling General Ledger Lesson 27. And Victor, please walk us through.
Thank you, Bob, for the introduction, and welcome to this Oracle Financials Functional Training. So today we are going to look at the topic of data access sets, which is something we have already mentioned before in passing. Under this topic of data access set, we are going to talk about balancing segments concept, and we're also going to look at management segment concept as they relate to the data access set. Okay. So let's get right into it. So we mentioned data access set before when we were creating our ledger, and we said that in order to access the ledger that we created, we have to assign this ledger to a responsibility. And once we assign the ledger to a responsibility, then we can use that responsibility to access the ledger. We also said that in order to assign the ledger to a responsibility, we do it through the profile options, and the profile option specifically is called data access set. So when we create a responsibility, there are three things that we usually provide or specify. That is the menu group, which controls the options that we see once we access that responsibility, the menu options that are available to that particular user. There is the request group, which dictates what requests that responsibility is able to run. And then there's a data group, which dictates how we are able to connect to the database. And then finally, in order to access our ledger, we provide the data access set at the profile options screen. So now, every time we create a ledger, a data access set is automatically created. Okay, and that data access set usually has the same name as our ledger that we have created. So in real sense, when we are assigning a ledger to a responsibility, what we are doing is we are assigning the data access set to that responsibility, not really the ledger. But since they have the same name, then it seems as if we are assigning the ledger. But in real sense, what we are doing is that when we create the ledger, a data access set is automatically created, and then we assign this data access set to our responsibility at the profile options screen, and then that way we are able to access our ledger. So now, what we are going to see in this lesson is that in the previous case, when we create a ledger and a data access set with the same name is created, we can also create a data access set, which then we assign to a responsibility. Okay, so in this data access set that we create, we can then specify the ledgers And in addition to that, we can also specify certain other privileges that are connected with that data access set, and then we assign that data access set to a responsibility. So in this case, we are able to modify. All right, we are able to modify this data access set. However, in this previous case, where we create a ledger first, we are not able to modify this data access set, which you can see here. We indicated that it's unmodifiable. So let me just demonstrate this for you in Oracle. So let's go to setup, then financials, then data access sets. I think I passed it. Financials, data access sets. There it is. Okay, let me close this. I'd open this window before I'm going to cancel. So when we go to this data access screen, okay? So the name of our ledger is Mascani Group US ledger, all right? So let's query that. So this is our data access set that was created once we created a primary ledger called Mascani Group US ledger. This data access set was created, and this is the data access set that we assigned to our responsibility, Mascani Group US responsibility that we usually use. Now you can see I cannot change anything on this page because everything is grayed out. All right. The other thing that we also mentioned in our previous lesson, when we were verifying whether our reporting currency ledgers had been created, is that those ledgers are also added to this data access set, which means that we can access those ledgers using the same responsibility. Although these reporting ledgers also have their own data access sets created separately. So you can see them here, and I cannot modify this either, okay? However, now we can create our own data access set, as you can see here. And when we are doing that, now we have the flexibility to choose a couple of things, unlike in the other option where we do not have any flexibility or any way of changing the characteristics of that data access set. When we create our own, then we are able to specify what ledgers are going to be placed in this data access set. And as we are going to see as we move on, we are able to also specify the level of access that the person to whom this data access set and consequently responsibility will be assigned. We are able to control what privileges they will have when they are accessing those ledgers that we place in this data access set. So what therefore is the purpose of what therefore is the purpose of the data access set? So one, it allows end users to have access to ledgers. We can say multiple ledgers because now we have seen that we can assign more than one ledger to a single data access set. So it will allow users to have access to multiple ledgers using a single responsibility. Okay. However, those ledgers must share the same calendar, and they must also share the same chart of accounts. So these are two of the forces which we have talked about. So they can have different currencies, and we have already seen that because our primary ledger and our reporting currencies ledger, they, as we have seen, are all under one data access set, but they have different currencies. However, the ledgers must have a similar calendar and a similar chart of accounts. We already know this. This is the navigation that we use to go to the data access set screen. So under data access set topic or concept, it allows us to carry out other security or access functions. And this is where we talk about now the management segment and the balancing segment as they are related to the data access set. So let's talk about the management segment. As we know, when we are creating our chart of accounts, we created different segments, and then we had what we called the flex field qualifiers. So, for example, we qualified our company segment as the balancing segment. We also qualified our natural account segment. We qualified it as a natural account segment, okay? So that the system can know that this is the account where the account numbers, this is the segment where the account numbers are stored or are under. We also saw that we have other qualifiers such as the cost center and the intercompany. Under those segment qualifiers, we also have the management segment, and that is what we are going to talk about. And the management segment is used to can be used to grant or deny access to accounts. And when I say accounts, I mean combinations. And the way we do this is by restricting or allowing certain values which are going to be in that segment from being used by certain users. Okay. So let's unpack that statement a bit. We have our chart of accounts. In that chart of accounts, we have our different segments. So we can select one segment to be a management segment. When we use that management, the use of that management segment is to control which users can access which values in that particular segment. when we do that, it means we grant access to those particular users. We grant or deny access to those users to certain values. And when we do that, it means there are certain combinations which they can't make or which they can't see, right? Because the combinations are made up of individual values drawn from the various segments. Now, this security or access function is done through the data access set, and we are going to see how. So once we have declared our management segment, then we can go to the data access set screen, and on that screen we can then specify which values are going to be available to which users through that data access set. And how are we going to do that? Once we create that data access set and define those access privileges, then we are going to assign that data access set to the responsibility, and then that responsibility is given to a user. So that user will have the access that is granted to him through that data access set. So the other thing that we need to know is that the balancing the natural account and the intercompany segments cannot be used as management segments. Okay. So once we have assigned a segment as a balancing segment, or as the natural account segment, or as the intercompany segment, then we cannot go ahead and use those segments as management segments as well. So the other thing is that the balancing segment can be used as a management segment also, but without declaring it as a management segment. So this is an option that we have also through the data access screen, and we are going to see how that works. Okay. So this is our chart of accounts structure. So basically what this says is that the balancing segment, which is the company, cannot be used as the management segment, neither can this. Okay. So the division segment, for example, in our case, we can use it as the management segment. We can also use the department segment as a management segment. We also can use the program segment as a management segment. Supposing one of our future segments, the one which we created just in case we need to add something in our chart of accounts, supposing one of them we use it as an intercompany, then we cannot go ahead and use that as a management segment. And and this one, since it has no values, it doesn't make sense to use it. So supposing we use our division segment as the management segment. We go and declare this as our management segment. What are the scenarios we can have where we use this segment as our management segment and therefore control access to different users? So supposing in the Maskani company there are like 3 levels of seniority in terms of accountant. And according to that, those 3 tiers or those 3 levels, the company wants these accountants to have different levels of access to the data in the system, okay, or to what they can do inquiries for, or do reports for, or data entry. So if we use the division segment as the management segment, so we can say, for example, we have these 4 divisions, 100, 101, 102, and 103. So we want the senior accountants to have read and write access to all the 4 divisions, okay? We then want to have the second level of accountants have read and write access to division 100 and 101, but only read access to division 102 and 103. And then the lowest level of seniority, the junior, we want them to have only read access. So they can't do data entry for any of these divisions, okay? So how would we go about this? We have said that the management segment, it works through the data access set screen. So what we would do is we would go to the data access screen, okay? We would create a new data access set. At that point, we have already declared the division segment as the management segment. So we will go and create a data access set, and in that data access set, as we're going to see, we are going to say that we are using the management segment to control access. We create that data access set, and there we are going to show that we want whoever has this data access set attached to their responsibility, we want them to have read and write access to all 4 divisions, okay? So once we have created that data access set, then we can go ahead and assign it to a responsibility, and then assign that responsibility to this senior accountant, right? The user, the end user. So this senior accountant, once they log in using their user, they're going to have a responsibility there, and that responsibility is going to be assigned to a ledger or a data access set, and he's going to have read and write access to all these divisions, okay? We are going to do the same for this mid-level. We go and we create a data access set. However, in that particular one, we will show that we want this data access set to only grant read and write access to division 100 and 101, but only read access to division 102 and 103. Once we have created that data access set, we are going to assign it to a responsibility, okay, which we may have to create a new responsibility. And then now that responsibility is assigned to a user who is a mid-level accountant. And the process goes on for this junior level accountant, okay? So what we would have in this case is 3 data access sets, okay? 3 data access sets and 3 responsibilities, and then assigned to 3 users. All right. So that is in the let's say when you're doing implementation in a real life setting. That's how you do it. But in our case, so that we can see all this in action, we are going to create these data access sets, assign them to responsibilities, and then we assign those responsibility to our user. So all those responsibilities are going to be accessible to one user, and in that way we can see how the security or access options work for each of these data access sets. Now, the other thing that we need to know about the management segment is that it can be declared during or after the chart of accounts creation. Okay. However, when you're doing it after you create the chart of accounts and not during, so when you're doing during the chart of accounts creation, you do it through the flex field qualifiers screen. All right. However, if you do it after you've already created your chart of accounts, it is recommended. It is advisable that you don't do it. You should not do it using the flex field qualifiers because you risk data corruption. So the correct way to do it after creating the chart of accounts is through this standard requests. Okay. So you run these two standard requests, and you should run them in this order. So the first one you run is program prepare general batches for management segment upgrade. And then once this program has run and is completed, then you run this second one, complete management segment. And that way you will be able to declare your management segment. The other thing about it is that only one segment can be used as a management segment. So you cannot have two segments at a time, which are management segments. And once you select a segment as your management segment, it cannot be changed. Okay, so these are just things that you need to note before you carry out these tasks as a as an Oracle financials consultant. So I just wanted to talk about other scenarios that could go through. We have already said that we have already described how we create data access sets for each of these three levels. If this is our scenario, the other thing I wanted to mention is that we can have, and we have already said this, we can have more than one ledger in our data access set, and we can specify the privileges for each of those ledgers. Okay, so just like the way our data access set for a primary ledger, it also has the reporting currency ledgers under it. We can also create our own data access set and have different ledgers under it with different security privileges. Okay, the only thing we have to remember is that all those ledgers, they have to share the same chart of accounts. So I just want to go to Oracle. So now this is our data access set screen. So what I am trying to say is that when you create the data access screen, you will see here you have a field for chart of accounts. When you come to this data access screen, you will see here you have a chart of accounts field, and you also have the calendar. So it means that when you then go ahead and put ledgers here, which are going to be this under this data access set, those ledgers, they have to be sharing that chart of accounts, and they have to be sharing the same calendar. Okay. So now what I want us to do is just see how we would go about implementing this scenario. Okay. So the first thing that we are going to need to do is to go and declare this division segment as our management segment. Okay, because we didn't do that when we were creating our chart of accounts. So after we have done that, we are then going to be able to create a data access set and use this we use this segment as our management segment to implement this scenario. The other thing that I wanted to mention also, we said that the balancing segment can also be used in the same way without declaring it as a management segment, right? So this scenario that I have implemented here, instead of using the management segment to grant or deny access, we can use the company segment. So here we can have read and write for company 01 and 02, and then here we can have maybe read and write for company 1 and read for company 2, and then here we can say that this guy has only read access to company 1 and company 02. So now we have understood what we need to do in order to use data access set and to implement the management segment and the balancing segment security access. So we are going to look at this in our next session, and this is what we need to do. So Bob, unless you have something else to add, I think that's a good place to end.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.